So a lot has happened for the Dallas Mavericks over the last month and a half. Last season was a stellar one for this Dallas Mavericks team. They made it all the way to the Western Conference Finals before losing to the eventual champion Golden State Warriors. This was a big step in the right direction for Luka Doncic and the Dallas Mavericks, and something that they could build upon. The offseason was an interesting one for them. They let go of Jalen Brunson, but it wasn't a loss at the time that seemed to have too much of an impact towards the team. Luka Doncic came into the season as a favorite to win MVP, and to start the year, the team was about the same as they were last year. They were hovering around that 4th, 5th seed. Luka Doncic was doing crazy things and they were gelling, but the team still had flaws and everybody knew this. No one really expected them to make a deep playoff run, and some change was needed. And that's what they did at the trade deadline. They traded for Kyrie Irving, and a lot of people expected him to make some real noise. That level of scoring at the guard position is something that we haven't seen in a very long time. Immediately, the expectations were high, and some people were talking about championship aspirations for this team. It looked real good for the pairing through the first couple games, but it spiraled out of control very quickly. See, it was just a matter of time before the flaws that the Dallas Mavericks had were exposed. A team that was once the 5th seed now sees themselves on the outside looking in. The Dallas Mavericks are the 11th seed currently. They're tied record-wise with the OKC Thunder and need a lot to go their way to make the play-in. Their second half collapse has been a big disappointment. Over the last 20 or so games, this is a team that's playing as bad as the Rockets or the Spurs. Things aren't clicking, offensive assignments are being misread, the defensive side of the ball is lacking a lot, and it's been a lot of turmoil. You got players' dads speaking about issues in the locker rooms, Mark Cuban having some subliminal messages in press conferences, and Jason Kidd I don't really know what Jason Kidd is doing. And it's very worrisome considering the fact that Kyrie Irving is a free agent. There's question marks about whether he'll come back or not. There's question marks about how the team will look next season. It's a lot to handle, and we'll see if the Dallas Mavericks can keep up. Like I said, the Dallas Mavericks are on the outside looking in. Even if they do make the play-in, they will have to play the Lakers more than likely, and if they somehow do, they'd have to play either the Pelicans or the Timberwolves, and that isn't an easy task itself. So, as we stand right now, I don't see this team making the playoffs, and with that in mind, we have to question what's next for them. So before we get into what's next for the Dallas Mavericks, we have to talk more about what went wrong, and I think there's 3 main issues at that they really need to solve. The biggest issue for me is obviously defense. On the season, this team is ranked 23rd in defensive rating. This team doesn't block many shots, if any at all. They don't generate many turnovers. Overall, it's lackluster play, and when you look at team construction, you can see why that is. The starting lineup they run consists of Luka Doncic, Kyrie Irving, Tim Hardaway Jr., Reggie Bullock, and Dwight Powell. What are you even doing defensively with that lineup? They're small in size, there's no real rim presence, and it's just overall lazy efforts. This team has failed to get a legit center on the team since Tyson Chandler, and the lack of moves surrounding this area is very telling. Their center rotation right now consists of Maxi Kleber and Dwight Powell. You have Christian Wood that plays there sometimes, but for some odd reason, he doesn't get a lot of opportunities. And JaVale McGee is old, so he isn't really providing anything in that position anyway. This right here is your #1 priority in the offseason. Getting a legit center that can play legit minutes and be a legit threat on both the offensive and defensive side. Once you establish that, then you can look to get some perimeter defenders. Josh Green is a solid defender. Reggie Bullock is a solid defender, but that's not going to cut it. You're going to need more, especially with the backcourt of Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic. And then it's going to be up to the coach to get a system that works. And speaking of the coach, let's just segue on to the next problem. It's Jason Kidd. Jason Kidd's rotations make little to no sense, but he doesn't really have much to work with. But I feel like the biggest question mark surrounding his coaching this year has been the weird energy towards Christian Wood. Looking at some recent game logs, he has a 34-minute game here, which is cool, 29 minutes, okay. But against Charlotte, he only played 17 minutes. Against Indiana, he only played 12 minutes. Against Philly, he only played 12 minutes. And he only played 13 minutes against the Miami Heat. Like, it's baffling as to why he's playing such little minutes. When you break it down and really think about it, maybe this has more to do with Mark Cuban than it does Jason Kidd. He liked a tweet on Twitter regarding Draymond Green in his podcast saying how sometimes coaches will manipulate or tweak the roster or minutes on the roster. This could be a tactic that the Dallas Mavericks are doing, considering the fact that Christian Wood is a free agent at the end of this year and they don't want to give him probably as much money as maybe he would hope for. Lessening his minutes and lessening his stats could do that, but at the same time, you're just going to frustrate and make him mad. And I don't think you're in any position to be doing that. We can talk about Jaden Hardy, who his minutes are inconsistent. Josh Green's minutes are inconsistent. There's a lot of inconsistencies in a lot of places. Like, there's no reason as to why the minutes distribution should be as bad as it is. And it comes back to Jason Kidd. Is a change needed? I'm not too sure. You could make the argument that it is, but Mark Cuban himself has come out and said that Jason Kidd is the coach of the future for this team, so I'm not really expecting anything to happen. It's just going to be up to him to fix whatever he's doing because it just doesn't make any sense. Now, the last issue on this team, and what you could argue it being the biggest, And hear me out while I say this. It's Luka Doncic. Now, I'm going to explain what I mean by this. Luka, of course, is the superstar player. He's averaging about 33 to 34 points per game. Was an early lock for MVP. He's going to be all NBA first team. All this. But for the Mavericks to really take that next step, for the Mavericks to be legit contenders, Luka is going to have to be a leader. And he's not doing leader things. Of any superstar in the league, Luka might be the laziest that we see. He's constantly complaining to the refs, never getting back on defense, doesn't even try in this area. And just think about the message that sends to the team. Luka has to lead by example, and he just isn't doing that. The efforts just aren't there. Body language is huge in the NBA. A lot of these role players, a lot of these vets, they ride off energy. And if your energy is down, you can expect the energy of the rest of the team to be down. So that's definitely one aspect that Luka needs to be better in. Another thing that I feel like has to be a change in Luka's game is that he just cannot be so demanding of the ball. We saw this issue with Kobe Bryant. We saw this issue with James Harden. A lot of these superstar players say it all the time. You cannot win games. You cannot be a legit contender if you have one player that demands the ball so much. He's going to have to be able to operate off the ball, and these are things that need to change. You pair that up with the laziness. You pair that up with the constant complaining and the body language being bad. It makes sense as to why the Mavericks kind of had the collapse that they had. But the good thing for this Mavericks team is that all three of these issues are fixable. All three of these issues can change, and I expect them to. So now let's talk about what's next. What is this team going to look like moving forward? So the biggest thing for me, as I said, is I don't really expect them to make the playoffs. If they do make the play-in, I don't think they're going to go far. Just saying that, let's say that they miss the playoffs, right? They have a top 10 protected pick that they need to go in their favor. For my example, we're going to say that the Dallas Mavericks remain at the 10th overall pick. So what do they do here? For me, I'm looking towards Toronto, and I'm calling the Toronto Raptors about OG Anunoby. OG Anunoby is the perfect 3-and-D player. He's one of the best on-ball and off-ball defenders in the NBA. His offensive game has taken leaps over the last couple of seasons. He's a very good three-point shooter, and he'll fit right in with this Dallas Mavericks team. You can create a trade package centered around Davis Bertans' expiring contract, the 10th overall pick, some future picks. If you have to throw in like a Jaden Hardy, I think you have to do that. Whatever you have to do to make it work, you do it. And I feel like they're going to be aggressive in making a move pertaining to, if not an OG Anunoby, someone within that caliber of player. Then once we get to free agency, this is where the real magic happens. You really need a center. But the biggest issue is that I don't think they're going to have the money to do so. You have to re-sign Kyrie Irving. Christian Wood, you could let walk, but if I was the Dallas Mavericks, I would prefer to re-sign him as opposed to not re-signing him. So considering that, that leaves you with about an MLE level player. And for the center position, there might be some okay options. Mason Plumlee is a decent option. You could look to throw some money at Andre Drummond just to have a body on the team. Jakob Poeltl would have made a lot of sense to trade for at the trade deadline, but unfortunately you didn't, and I don't think they're going to have the money or the capacity to even throw a legit contract at him. And outside of those guys, there aren't any legit options. So considering that, we have to look towards the trade market. You can maybe call up the Hawks and see if you can get Clint Capella. You could call Washington and see if they're willing to part ways with Daniel Gafford. If the Clippers fail in the playoffs once again, will they look to get rid of Ivica Zubac? I'm not sure, but you have some options, and honestly, it should be no reason why you can't improve that center position this offseason. Do what you can to get younger, do what you can to improve the defense, do what you can to improve the shooting, add some wing pieces, add some center pieces, and just like that, you have a team that fits and one that is scary in the Western Conference. That right there is a very, very solid team, and you have Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic in the backcourt. The sky's the limit for them. If this team can improve to a top 15 to top 10 defense next season, that's one that can compete with any team in the Western Conference. You have some real opportunities to have some real improvements on this team. It's just about if Mark Cuban can execute them or not. I'm rooting for the Dallas Mavericks, man. I want them to play some good basketball, but only time will tell if they can do so.